There comes a quiet moment in almost every life when the world seems to slow down. Not because anything around us has changed, but because something deep within us has grown tired of carrying the same invisible weight. It is a feeling that often arrives unnoticed, not dramatic enough to demand attention, yet impossible to ignore forever. It appears in the silence after a long day, in the hours before sleep, or in the strange emptiness that follows another attempt to become someone you hoped would finally feel enough. Perhaps tonight finds you in one of those moments. Perhaps you have spent years trying to become more successful, more lovable, more confident, more understood. You may have searched for answers in relationships, achievements, routines, books, or endless conversations with yourself. And yet, despite all your effort, there remains a quiet distance between who you are and the peace you have been longing to feel. It is a strange experience, isn't it? To spend so much of your life searching for something that always seems to remain just beyond your reach. Carl Jung believed that this search often begins in the wrong direction. We are taught to look outward for approval, affection, certainty, and identity. We learn to believe that if someone chooses us, if the world recognizes us, if we finally become impressive enough, then perhaps the restless voice inside will finally become quiet. But what if the voice is not asking for perfection? What if it has been asking for something entirely different? Tonight, we are not searching for quick advice or easy answers. We are entering a slower conversation, one that unfolds gently, the way moonlight slowly reveals the shape of a quiet landscape. There will be no pressure here, no need to rush toward conclusions, only an invitation to look inward with honesty, patience, and compassion. Because self-love, despite how often we hear the phrase, is rarely understood. Many imagine it as confidence, others imagine it as constant happiness. Some believe it means never doubting yourself again. But Jung saw something much deeper. He understood that loving yourself does not begin when every wound has healed. It begins the moment you stop abandoning the parts of yourself that hurt the most. That idea alone has the power to change an entire life. Imagine walking through an old forest at night. The trees are silent, the path is barely visible, and every unfamiliar shadow seems larger than it truly is. Most people spend their lives trying to escape this forest. They search desperately for brighter places, convinced that peace exists somewhere beyond the darkness. Yet Jung suggested something almost impossible to believe. The path out is not found by running away. It is found by walking deeper, not because the darkness is your enemy, but because it has been waiting to show you something about yourself that daylight never could. This journey is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering someone you have quietly forgotten, the version of yourself that existed before fear became your constant companion. Before you learned to hide your emotions, before you believed that your worth depended on your performance, before you began apologizing for simply being human. If these quiet reflections bring you comfort tonight, consider subscribing to the channel. Here, we explore Carl Jung's psychology through calm, thoughtful conversations designed to help you reflect, rest, and perhaps discover something new about yourself along the way. Now, if you are listening beneath dim lights, beneath a quiet ceiling, or with your eyes already beginning to grow heavy, allow yourself to settle a little deeper into this moment. There is nowhere else you need to be, nothing you need to solve tonight. No version of yourself you must become before morning. Only this breath, only this quiet room, only this gentle conversation. And perhaps, before this night is over, you may discover that the person you have spent your entire life searching for has been waiting patiently inside you all along. So let the world become still. Let your breathing slow. And together, let us begin where every true journey toward wholeness begins. Not with changing yourself, but with meeting yourself. Why we search for love. Outside ourselves. There is a quiet habit that follows almost every human being through life. It begins so early that most of us never notice it forming. Long before we learn who we truly are, we begin learning who we believe we must become. As children, we instinctively look into the faces of those around us, searching for something we cannot yet name. A smile tells us we are safe. A warm embrace tells us we belong. Gentle words become the first mirrors through which we begin to understand ourselves. We do not enter the world asking whether we are enough. That question is learned, slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. Perhaps there was a moment when your excitement was met with criticism. Perhaps your sadness was dismissed because someone believed strength meant silence. Perhaps your dreams seemed inconvenient to those who carried burdens of their own. No one intends to shape another person's inner world so deeply. Most people simply pass forward what they themselves were once given. A father who never learned tenderness may struggle to express it. A mother who spent her life seeking approval may unknowingly teach the same search. Generation after generation, invisible lessons travel without words. And somewhere along the way, the child begins making quiet decisions. If they smile when I behave this way, I should become this person. If they withdraw their affection when I show my anger, perhaps anger is dangerous. If they praise me only when I achieve something, maybe I am lovable only when I succeed. These conclusions rarely happen consciously. They settle gently into the unconscious, like dust gathering in an old house. Years pass. The child grows older, but the questions remain, not because they are still children, but because the unconscious remembers everything that helped it survive. Carl Jung understood this with remarkable clarity. He believed that much of what we call personality is not our true nature at all. Instead, it is something carefully assembled over many years, a beautiful mask, a useful mask, sometimes even a necessary one. He called this mask the persona. The persona allows us to function in society. It helps us become professionals, parents, friends, partners. It teaches us how to behave, how to belong, how to be accepted. There is nothing inherently wrong with it. Without the persona, human relationships would become almost impossible. Yet a quiet danger appears when we begin confusing the mask with the person wearing it. Many spend decades improving the mask. Very few pause long enough to meet the face beneath it. Imagine an actor who has played the same character for 40 years. At first, stepping into the role requires effort. Later, it becomes natural. Eventually, something unexpected happens. The actor begins forgetting where the performance ends. Life can become like that. You become the dependable one, the successful one, the strong one, the funny one, the caretaker, the achiever, the peacemaker, the person who never complains, the one who always says yes. Each role earns acceptance. Each role earns approval. Each role earns another small reward from the outside world. And slowly, almost without noticing, your identity becomes woven together with the expectations of others. It feels safe, until one quiet evening, when you find yourself alone and realize you no longer know who you are without the audience. This realization often arrives gently, perhaps after a relationship ends, after retirement, after children leave home, after an unexpected loss, or perhaps during one ordinary night. Very much like this one, suddenly the silence feels unfamiliar. Not because silence itself is frightening, but because it removes every distraction that once kept deeper questions asleep. Who am I when no one is watching? Who am I when I stop trying to impress? Who am I if I no longer need permission to exist? These questions cannot be answered by achievement. They cannot be answered by social media. They cannot be answered by praise, because they belong to a deeper place. a place beneath identity, beneath reputation, beneath success, beneath failure. This is where Jung gently invites us to look, not toward the world, but inward. Many people fear this inward journey because they imagine they will find only pain, yet that is rarely what waits there. More often, they find someone who has simply been waiting patiently beneath years of performance, waiting beneath endless attempts to earn love that never needed to be earned in the first place. Perhaps that forgotten self still remembers simple things, the joy of creating without comparison, the freedom of speaking honestly, the peace of existing without proving. Children know these things naturally, until life convinces them otherwise. This is why so many adults feel an ache they cannot explain. They are not merely exhausted, they are separated from themselves. No amount of external success can completely heal that separation. You may build a remarkable career. You may become admired, respected, successful. You may receive every compliment you once dreamed of hearing, and still lie awake wondering why peace remains so distant. The world celebrates the mask, but the soul quietly waits to be recognized. This waiting is patient. It does not shout, it whispers. Sometimes through anxiety, sometimes through loneliness, sometimes through an unexpected sense that your life no longer feels like your own. These feelings are not punishments, they are invitations. The psyche has an extraordinary way of calling us home, not by making life easier, but by making the old way of living impossible to ignore. Perhaps this is why some people experience what appears to be a crisis in the middle of life. From the outside, everything seems successful. Inside, something begins falling apart. Jung did not see this as failure. He often saw it as the beginning of transformation. Because sometimes, the life you carefully built must become quiet enough for your real life to finally begin speaking. And maybe that quiet voice has already been speaking to you, not through dramatic revelations, but through small moments. The strange emptiness after reaching another goal, the feeling that something essential is still missing, the longing that appears for reasons you cannot explain. These moments are not signs that something is wrong with you. They may be signs that something true is trying to emerge. The question is not whether you have spent years wearing a mask. Almost everyone has. The question is far gentler than that. When the mask becomes too heavy to carry, will you have the courage to discover the face that has been waiting beneath it? There is a quiet sadness that many people carry without ever giving it a name. It does not always appear as tears. Sometimes it looks like perfectionism. Sometimes it hides behind endless productivity. Sometimes it disguises itself as independence. And sometimes it becomes the strange feeling that no matter how much love you receive, it never seems to reach the place that needs it most. Perhaps you have experienced this. Someone tells you that you are enough. For a brief moment, you believe them. Then, almost without warning, the feeling fades. The old doubt quietly returns. The mind begins whispering familiar questions. What if they knew who I really am? What if they eventually leave? What if I disappoint them? These questions are rarely born in the present. They belong to another time, another version of you, one much smaller, much quieter, a child who did not yet have the language to explain what was happening. Carl Jung often reminded us that the child never truly disappears. We grow older, our bodies change, our voices deepen, our responsibilities multiply, but somewhere beneath the countless experiences of adulthood, the child continues to observe, continues to remember, continues to hope, and perhaps most importantly, continues to wait. Not for toys, not for praise, but for the love that once felt uncertain. Imagine an old house standing at the edge of a quiet forest. From the outside, it appears sturdy. The walls remain strong, the roof still stands. Visitors admire its beauty. Few suspect that one room has remained locked for decades. Inside that room sits a child, not frozen in time, but frozen in feeling, still holding questions that no one answered, still carrying fears that no one noticed, still believing that love could disappear at any moment. Many of us spend our entire lives decorating the outside of that house. We repaint the walls. We replace the windows. We buy larger homes, build successful careers, collect accomplishments, yet the child remains in the same quiet room, waiting, patiently. This is one of Jung's deepest observations. Healing is not simply adding better experiences to life. It is returning to the places inside ourselves that were left alone. The unconscious has a remarkable memory. It does not remember facts the way the mind does. It remembers emotions, atmospheres, the feeling in the room, the silence after harsh words, the warmth of a hand, the absence of one. It remembers what safety felt like, and it remembers when safety disappeared. That is why an ordinary conversation today can awaken emotions that seem far larger than the moment deserves. Someone cancels plans, someone forgets to reply, someone speaks with a colder tone than usual. The conscious mind says, "It isn't a big deal." Yet the heart reacts as though something precious has been lost. Why? Because the present moment has quietly opened the door to an older memory, not necessarily a memory you can describe, but one your nervous system has carried for years. Jung believed that the unconscious speaks through feeling long before it speaks through thought. This is why certain emotional reactions seem mysterious. They are not irrational, they are symbolic. They point toward experiences that shaped us before we fully understood ourselves. Perhaps there was a time when you learned that being quiet kept the peace. Perhaps expressing anger led to rejection. Perhaps asking for comfort was met with impatience. Slowly, your emotional world adapted, not because it was weak, because it was wise. Children survive by adapting. If love seems conditional, they become whatever appears most lovable. If vulnerability feels unsafe, they learn to hide it. If mistakes bring shame, they begin fearing imperfection. These adaptations are extraordinary. They protect us. They help us survive. But what protects a child can quietly imprison the adult. Years later, you may find yourself apologizing for taking up space, feeling guilty for resting, afraid of disappointing people, unable to receive affection without suspicion, not because something is wrong with you, but because an old survival strategy is still faithfully doing its job. The remarkable thing about the psyche is its loyalty. It does not easily abandon what once kept us alive, even when that strategy is no longer necessary. Imagine carrying an umbrella every single day because years ago you once survived a terrible storm. Eventually, the storm ends. The sky becomes clear. Yet you continue holding the umbrella, not because you enjoy its weight, but because somewhere inside you, rain still feels possible. Many emotional wounds work this way. They remain open not because we enjoy suffering, but because the unconscious still believes it is protecting us. This realization changes everything because it replaces judgment with compassion. Instead of asking, "Why am I like this?" you begin asking, "What happened that made this feel necessary?" That single question opens a completely different door. Self-love begins there, not in admiration, not in confidence, but in curiosity, gentle curiosity, the kind a wise parent might offer a frightened child. Imagine kneeling beside that child in the quiet room, not to correct them, not to lecture them, simply to sit beside them, to say, "I understand why you became afraid." You did the best you could. You don't have to face this alone anymore. Perhaps no one ever spoke those words to you. Perhaps tonight, you are hearing them for the first time. If so, let yourself stay with them. There is no need to rush. No need to convince yourself that everything is suddenly healed. Healing rarely arrives like lightning. It arrives like dawn, slowly, almost unnoticed, until one morning you realize the darkness is no longer complete. Jung believed that every genuine transformation begins with seeing what has long remained hidden, not changing it, seeing it. Because what is seen with compassion begins to lose its need to hide, and what no longer hides can finally begin to heal. Perhaps the child inside you never expected perfection. Perhaps they never needed someone who had all the answers. Perhaps they only needed someone willing to stay. Someone who would not leave when things became uncomfortable. Someone who would not turn away from tears. Someone who could quietly whisper, "You are safe now." The beautiful truth is this, that someone can become you, not overnight, not without effort, but one small act of kindness at a time. One patient breath, one gentle thought, one quiet evening like this one, because every moment you choose compassion instead of criticism, you rewrite a story that may have been waiting decades for a different ending. And perhaps, without even realizing it, that new ending has already begun. There comes a moment in every long season of longing when something unexpected begins to happen. Not outside you, inside. It is so quiet that you almost miss it. For a long time, your attention has been turned toward the image of another person, toward what they represented, toward what was lost, toward what never became. Your thoughts have circled them so many times that it feels impossible to imagine your inner world without their presence. And yet, without announcing itself, something has already begun to change. The memory still visits. The face still appears. The name still echoes through certain moments of silence. But the emotional weight is no longer exactly the same. It is softer now, less urgent, almost as though your psyche has stopped demanding answers and has begun asking different questions. Carl Jung believed that the deepest transformations rarely happen through dramatic decisions. They happen beneath awareness, like roots growing underground, invisible, patient, silent. You rarely notice the exact day a tree begins to blossom. Only one morning you realize the branches are no longer bare. The same is true for the human soul. Healing often arrives before the conscious mind recognizes it, not because pain disappears, but because your relationship to the pain slowly changes. This surprises many people. They expect healing to feel like forgetting, like waking up one morning and realizing the person no longer exists in their thoughts. But genuine psychological healing is usually much more subtle. The memory remains, only it stops owning you. There is a profound difference between carrying a memory and being carried by it. For months, perhaps years, the image of this person carried you. It decided your emotional weather. It colored ordinary days. It quietly influenced how you saw yourself, how you trusted, how you hoped, how you loved. But eventually, something begins to reverse. Now, you are the one carrying the memory, instead of living inside it. That shift is almost impossible to notice while it is happening, yet it changes everything. Jung often described individuation as the process of recovering the parts of ourselves we had unknowingly placed outside. We imagine another person possesses something essential: peace, confidence, love, wholeness, safety, purpose. But what if they never truly possessed those things? What if they simply awakened your awareness of qualities that had always been sleeping inside you? Imagine someone holding a candle inside a dark room. You don't believe the candle created the furniture. The light simply revealed what had already been there. The same may be true of love. Perhaps the person did not create your tenderness. They illuminated it. Perhaps they did not create your courage. They invited it forward. Perhaps they did not give you meaning. They reminded you that you were capable of experiencing it. This changes the entire story, because now, instead of asking, "How do I get them back?" the deeper question becomes, "How do I remain connected to the part of myself they awakened?" That is an entirely different journey. One leads outward, the other leads home. There is a strange sadness in realizing this, not because it diminishes what you felt, but because it asks you to become responsible for your own becoming. No one else can continue that work for you, not even the person who first inspired it. Perhaps this is why certain relationships end when they do, not because they failed, but because they completed the part they were meant to play. Some people arrive not to stay forever, but to awaken something that cannot return to sleep. Once your soul has recognized a deeper possibility, it can never fully pretend ignorance again, even if life becomes ordinary, even if loneliness returns, even if grief visits from time to time. Something inside already knows. There is more to you than you once believed, and once the psyche knows that, it cannot unknow it. If you're listening tonight, perhaps there is someone your mind still visits, someone whose absence still carries quiet weight. You don't have to fight that. You don't have to apologize for it. Instead, try asking yourself something different. What part of me first came alive when they entered my life? Not, what did they give me? But, what awakened inside me? Sit with that question. Not to answer immediately, only to allow your unconscious room to respond. Sometimes the most important answers arrive long after the question has been asked. If this reflection has stayed with you, take a quiet moment now, and let me know in the comments, what part of yourself do you think someone once awakened that you're now learning to reclaim on your own? There is no right answer, only honesty. And sometimes, reading another person's journey reminds us that we are far less alone than we imagined. There is another possibility, one that Carl Jung spent much of his life trying to understand. It is a possibility both beautiful and unsettling. Perhaps the person who occupies your thoughts was never simply another human being. Perhaps, without either of you realizing it, they became the screen upon which your unconscious projected an entire hidden world. Projection is one of those words that sounds complicated until you experience it yourself. Then it becomes impossible to ignore. Imagine walking through a dark room carrying a lantern. Wherever the light falls, shapes appear, colors emerge. Objects seem almost magical. But the light was never inside those objects. The light came from the lantern. Our psyche often behaves the same way. When we meet someone who awakens something profound inside us, we naturally believe the feeling belongs entirely to them. They made me feel alive. They completed me. They understood me. They were different. And perhaps some of those things are true. But Jung gently invites another question. How much of what you experienced actually belonged to them? And how much belonged to your own unconscious? This is not meant to reduce love. Quite the opposite. It reveals just how mysterious love truly is. Because the unconscious does not simply recognize another person, it recognizes possibilities, hidden qualities, forgotten potentials. untouched parts of ourselves, it quietly whispers, "There. There is something you have been searching for." And immediately, the heart follows. Jung described this through the ideas of the anima and the animus, whether you agree with every aspect of his theory or not. The symbolism remains extraordinarily powerful. He believed every man carries within him an inner feminine image, not femininity in a social sense, but qualities like intuition, tenderness, receptivity, emotional depth, compassion, the mysterious world of feeling. Likewise, every woman carries an inner masculine image, not masculinity as dominance, but as clarity, purpose, direction, courage, steadiness, and quiet inner authority. Most people never consciously meet these inner figures. Instead, they project them outward, onto another person. Suddenly someone appears, and they seem impossibly perfect, not because they actually are, but because they carry the exact qualities our unconscious has been longing to encounter. Without realizing it, we fall in love, not only with them, but with an unfinished part of ourselves. This explains something almost everyone has experienced. Have you ever met someone and felt connected before you even knew anything about them? As though something ancient recognized them, as though your heart had reached a conclusion before your mind had gathered any evidence. Jung would suggest that what recognized them was not logic, it was the unconscious, recognizing its own hidden image. This is why certain attractions feel almost supernatural. They arrive too quickly, too deeply, too completely. The person becomes larger than life. Every smile feels significant. Every silence feels meaningful. Every conversation seems destined. But destiny is often the language projection uses before consciousness awakens. That doesn't mean the relationship is false. It means it carries symbolic weight, much heavier than either person realizes. Eventually, reality begins its quiet work. The other person reveals ordinary flaws, contradictions, limitations, human fears. Suddenly, the image begins to crack. Many relationships end here, not because love disappears, but because projection begins to dissolve. And this is one of the most painful moments of psychological growth, because when projection withdraws, it feels as though love itself has disappeared. Yet Jung believed something entirely different was happening. Real love only begins after projection ends. Before that, we are often loving our own unconscious reflected back to us. After projection fades, we finally meet the actual person. Sometimes, we discover we truly love them. Other times, we realize we had been loving an image all along. Neither outcome is failure. Both are revelations. But what happens? If the relationship ends before projection has had time to dissolve, that may be why certain people stay in your mind for years. Your unconscious never finished its conversation. The symbolic image remained intact, frozen in time, untouched by ordinary life. No arguments, no disappointments, no daily routines, no gradual erosion of fantasy. Only possibility. Possibility has extraordinary staying power because reality eventually finishes. Possibility never does. Perhaps this explains why your mind keeps returning. Not because you are trapped by the past, but because the unconscious still recognizes unfinished psychological material. It keeps presenting the image, as if quietly asking, "Have you discovered what this person was trying to show you?" Not who they were, but who you are becoming. That is a very different question. If you're still listening tonight, pause for a moment. Think of the person who returns most often in your thoughts. Now ask yourself, if they disappeared from my memory tomorrow, what quality would disappear with them? Would it be hope, tenderness, adventure, safety, freedom, joy, being fully seen? Whatever answer appears, hold it gently, because that quality may not belong to them anymore. It may be waiting to become part of you. If this reflection resonates with your own experience, take a quiet moment to write just one word in the comments. What quality did someone awaken inside you? Sometimes, naming it is the first step toward reclaiming it. There is one part of Jung's psychology that many people misunderstand: the shadow. For some, the word immediately brings images of darkness, of hidden anger, of fear, of everything ugly inside the human mind. But Jung meant something much more compassionate than that. The shadow is not simply everything bad about us. It is everything we have been forced to leave behind. Every feeling that once seemed unacceptable. Every dream we abandoned to become practical. Every emotion we learned to hide. Every part of ourselves that whispered, "I don't think I'm allowed to exist." Over time, these forgotten pieces do not disappear. They wait, patiently, silently, like children standing outside a locked house, still hoping someone will eventually open the door. Perhaps, without realizing it, the person who refuses to leave your mind stood in front of that forgotten door, not because they intended to, but because something about them made one of those abandoned parts of you begin breathing again. Maybe they accepted a side of you that nobody else had ever noticed. Maybe you laughed differently around them. Maybe you cried without shame. Maybe your voice became softer. Maybe your heart stopped performing for approval. For the first time in years, you simply existed, without pretending, without protecting, without editing yourself. And the shadow noticed. It quietly whispered, "There you are." Imagine living for years inside a house where only half the rooms are used. The other rooms remain locked, covered in dust. You forget they even exist. Then one day, someone accidentally opens one of those doors. Sunlight enters. Fresh air moves through the room. You suddenly remember, this room was always part of my home. That is what certain relationships do. Not because they build something new, because they reveal something forgotten. The tragedy comes later. When the person leaves, the room does not disappear, but it becomes dark again. Many people mistake this darkness for missing the other person. Sometimes, they are actually mourning the version of themselves that finally stepped into the light. This distinction changes everything. Because if what you truly miss is yourself, then your healing cannot depend upon another person's return. The shadow never asks for punishment. It asks for recognition. Every recurring memory, every repeating dream, every unexpected wave of emotion may simply be the psyche saying, "Please don't abandon this part of yourself again." How often have you promised yourself, "I'll never be that vulnerable again. I'll never love like that again. I'll never trust someone that deeply again." Those promises often sound wise, but beneath them, the shadow quietly grieves. Because every promise to stop feeling is also a promise to stop living fully. Jung warned against this. He believed that whatever we reject within ourselves eventually begins controlling us from the unconscious. Ignored fear becomes anxiety. Ignored sadness becomes numbness. Ignored tenderness becomes isolation. Ignored love becomes obsession. Not because love itself is dangerous, but because what is refused always finds another way to be seen. This may explain why the same memories return again and again. Not because the past refuses to release you, but because part of your own soul is still waiting to be welcomed home. Perhaps every time you remember them, your unconscious is actually pointing toward yourself, almost like placing a gentle hand on your shoulder, not saying, "Go find them," but whispering, "Come find yourself." There is extraordinary tenderness in this idea, because it removes blame. You are not weak because you remember. You are not broken because certain emotions remain. You are human, and humans heal by including, not by amputating. The psyche does not become whole by cutting away painful experiences. It becomes whole by weaving them into a larger story. If you have ever walked through an old forest, you may have noticed something remarkable. When a tree falls, the forest does not erase it. The fallen tree slowly becomes part of the forest itself. Moss begins to grow. Small flowers emerge. Birds rest upon it. New roots find nourishment there. Years later, what once appeared to be destruction has quietly become the foundation for new life. The human psyche often heals in exactly this way. The experiences that once seemed to destroy us become the very soil from which wisdom begins to grow. Not immediately, not dramatically, but faithfully. This is why Jung believed suffering should never be wasted, not glorified, not romanticized, but listened to. Pain always arrives carrying a question. Not, "Why did this happen to me?" but, "What part of me is asking to be born through this?" That question changes the entire landscape. Because now the suffering is no longer meaningless. It becomes a doorway. Perhaps not a doorway you would have chosen, but a doorway nonetheless. If someone has lived in your mind for months, or even years, perhaps tonight, instead of asking why they won't leave, ask something quieter. What part of myself first began speaking because of them? And have I truly listened? Do not rush the answer. The unconscious speaks slowly, sometimes through memories, sometimes through dreams, sometimes through long stretches of silence. Trust the silence. It has been working long before you noticed it. If this reflection resonates with your own journey, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment with a single sentence. "I'm learning to come back to myself." Not for the algorithm, but because sometimes writing those words is the first moment we actually begin believing them. There is a quiet moment that arrives in nearly every healing journey. It does not announce itself. There are no fireworks, no sudden certainty, no dramatic realization. Instead, one ordinary evening, you notice that you have remembered them. Without suffering in quite the same way, the memory still came, but something inside remained calm. At first, you hardly trust it. You wonder if perhaps you are simply distracted, or tired, or emotionally numb. But little by little, you begin to realize something extraordinary. The memory has not disappeared. It has changed its place inside you. For so long, it lived at the center of your emotional world. Everything revolved around it. Every quiet night seemed to lead back to the same thoughts. Every unanswered question felt unbearably important. Every possibility continued living inside your imagination. But now, almost without noticing, the memory has moved, not out of your life, into your history. That is a profound difference, because history does not demand. History simply exists. Jung believed that every meaningful experience leaves behind a symbol, and symbols never disappear completely. They mature. Think of an old photograph. When it was first taken, It captured an entire world. The emotions were immediate. The voices were alive. The future was still unwritten. Years later, you look at the same photograph. Nothing in the picture has changed, yet everything inside you has. The image no longer hurts because of what it lacks. Instead, it quietly reminds you of who you once were. That is how healing often feels. The memory remains exactly where it always was. Only the observer has become someone new. Perhaps that is the true purpose of time, not to erase, but to deepen understanding. People often say, time heals. But Jung might have answered differently. Time alone heals nothing. Awareness heals. Time simply gives awareness the space to grow. Without awareness, years can pass while the same wound repeats itself. The same relationships, the same fears, the same longing, the same unconscious patterns. Healing begins, not when time passes, but when consciousness expands, when you finally begin seeing your experience differently. There is another reason memories soften. Eventually, your nervous system grows tired of carrying survival where there is no longer danger. At first, every reminder of the person feels like an emergency, a song, a place, a certain season. Even silence itself, your body reacts before your thoughts do. This is because emotional attachment is not stored only in memory. It is stored in the body. The heart learns rhythms. The nervous system learns expectations. The unconscious builds pathways around experiences that once felt deeply meaningful. Breaking those pathways takes patience, not force. Imagine walking through a forest every day. Over time, a clear trail forms beneath your feet. If one day you stop walking that path, the trail does not disappear overnight. Grass slowly grows back. Leaves begin covering the ground. Rain reshapes the earth. Months later, the path is still there, only softer, less defined. Eventually, nature quietly reclaims it. The human psyche heals in much the same way. The old emotional pathways are not destroyed. They simply stop being traveled every single day. This is why healing often feels invisible. You rarely notice progress while it is happening, only later. You realize that something which once consumed your evenings now visits only occasionally. Something that once stole your sleep now simply passes through your thoughts before disappearing again. That is not forgetting. That is integration. Integration was one of Jung's favorite ideas. To integrate does not mean removing part of yourself. It means allowing every experience, even painful ones, to become part of a larger whole. Nothing is wasted, not the joy, not the grief, not the unanswered love, not the nights spent searching for meaning. Everything becomes material for the soul, even heartbreak, especially heartbreak, because heartbreak has a remarkable way of stripping away illusion. It leaves us standing before ourselves with unusual honesty. And honesty, though painful, is often the beginning of freedom. Perhaps you have noticed something curious. The older you become, the less interested you are in perfect endings. Instead, you begin appreciating honest ones. Not every relationship was meant to last forever. Not every connection was meant to become a lifelong story. Some people arrive carrying a lesson rather than a promise. Others carry a mirror instead of permanence. Some awaken your courage. Others awaken your wounds. A few manage to awaken both at the same time. Those are usually the ones we never forget. Not because they belong to us, because they helped reveal us to ourselves. If you are listening tonight, there is something I hope you remember. The fact that someone changed you does not mean they still own the person you are becoming. Those are two different things. Influence is not ownership. Memory is not destiny. Love is not imprisonment. Your story did not stop where theirs ended. Your psyche simply needed time to gather back everything it had discovered. Take a slow breath and ask yourself one gentle question. If I met that person today, as the person I have become, what would be different? Do not answer quickly. Sometimes the most meaningful answer is the silence that follows, because silence often means the unconscious has begun working. If this reflection has brought you even a little peace tonight, let me know in the comments by writing just 3 words: I am healing. Not because healing is complete, but because every quiet step toward yourself deserves to be acknowledged. There is a quiet misunderstanding that many of us carry for years. We believe that the person who changed our life was meant to stay in it. It seems obvious. If someone awakened so much inside us, surely they were supposed to remain. Surely the story was interrupted. Surely something went wrong. But life, especially the inner life, rarely follows the stories we imagine. Carl Jung often reminded us that the psyche is not interested in comfort as much as it is interested in growth. Growth asks different things from us. Sometimes, it asks us to walk beside someone. Other times, it asks us to continue alone, not because we failed, but because what needed to awaken already had. Think about a sunrise. The purpose of the dawn is not to stay forever. Its purpose is to reveal the landscape. Once the mountains become visible, the sunrise slowly gives way to daylight. No one mourns the disappearance of the dawn, because it accomplished exactly what it came to do. Perhaps certain people enter our lives in much the same way, not to become the whole journey, but to illuminate the next step. This idea is difficult for the heart. The heart loves permanence. It wants promises. It wants certainty. It wants stories that end neatly. But the soul often grows through incompletion, an unfinished conversation, a goodbye that arrived too early, a love that changed us without remaining. These experiences leave us standing before ourselves with questions we never thought to ask. Who am I? When the one who reflected me is gone, who am I becoming? Now that I have seen another possibility, what parts of myself are asking to be lived rather than remembered? These questions are painful, but they are also sacred because they pull our attention away from what we lost and toward what is still waiting to be discovered. There is something remarkable about thresholds. You rarely notice them while you are crossing. Only afterward do you realize everything became different on the other side. Perhaps the person you cannot forget was one of those thresholds, not the house itself, not the final destination, simply the doorway through which your life quietly changed direction. At the time, it felt like the entire story. Now, with distance, you may begin to see it differently. The doorway was never meant to become your home. Its purpose was simply to invite you through. Jung believed that every genuine transformation asks for a symbolic death, not the death of the body, the death of an old identity, the version of yourself who believed love could only come from one place, the version who believed happiness depended upon one outcome, the version who thought meaning existed only inside one relationship. Those identities eventually become too small. Life gently, or sometimes painfully, asks us to outgrow them. This is not betrayal, it is maturation. A tree does not betray the seed by becoming larger. The seed fulfilled its purpose. The tree simply continued growing. Perhaps your attachment served the same purpose. It planted something. Now, life asks you to become what was planted. Imagine holding a bird in your hands. If you close your fingers too tightly, you harm what you love. If you keep your hands gently open, the bird may leave, or it may remain. But either way, your hands have learned tenderness. Sometimes that is the lesson, not possession, tenderness. Many of us spend years believing that love means holding on, but perhaps mature love looks different. Perhaps mature love says, I am grateful that our paths crossed. I honor what changed inside me, and I release the need for life to repeat the past. That kind of love is extraordinarily rare because it asks us to value transformation more than possession. If someone still visits your thoughts tonight, there is no need to force them away. Simply notice them, like noticing an old constellation in the night sky. You do not need to reach it. You do not need to rename it. You simply recognize. It helped you navigate once. Now, there are other stars, other seasons, other landscapes. The sky has grown larger than one constellation. So has your soul. There is a sentence often attributed to Jung that captures this beautifully. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Perhaps what once felt like fate was actually your unconscious trying to guide you toward yourself, not through certainty, but through experience, not through comfort, but through awakening. That changes the story entirely, because now, instead of asking, why did they leave? You begin asking, what did they leave within me? That single question can reshape an entire life. If this reflection has stayed with you until this moment, thank you, not simply for listening, but for being willing to look inward. Few people choose that path. It is quieter, slower, often lonelier, yet it is also the path that leads home. And perhaps, home has always been what your soul was searching for. Perhaps, by now, the room around you has become quieter. The thoughts that once arrived all at once may already be moving more slowly, almost like leaves floating down a calm river. There is no need to stop them. There is no need to hold on to them either. Simply watch them pass. For so long, you believed your task was to understand every memory, to explain every emotion, to solve every unanswered question. But perhaps, not every mystery asks to be solved. Some ask only to be witnessed. There is a quiet freedom in realizing this. Not every chapter of your life was meant to become permanent. Not every person who transformed you was meant to walk beside you forever. Some people arrive like seasons. Spring does not apologize for becoming summer. Autumn does not cling to its leaves. Winter never argues with the snow as it quietly melts away. Nature has always understood something we often forget. Everything meaningful changes form. Nothing truly alive remains exactly the same. The heart, little by little, learns this rhythm as well. Perhaps tonight, the person who once occupied every corner of your thoughts can simply become one gentle presence among many memories, not erased, not forgotten, simply placed where they belong, inside the long story of your becoming, because that is what they became. A chapter, not the entire book. A doorway, not the destination. A season, not your whole climate. Sometimes we fear that letting go will erase what mattered, but the opposite is often true. only when we stop clinging can we finally appreciate what the experience truly gave us. Its lessons, its tenderness, its sorrow, its beauty, its transformation. Nothing has to disappear for peace to arrive. Peace often comes when we stop demanding that life return to an earlier version of itself. Carl Jung believed that becoming whole was never about becoming perfect. It was about becoming honest. Honest enough to admit, I loved, I hoped, I suffered, I changed, I survived. These simple truths carry remarkable strength, not because they make life easier, but because they make life real, and reality, when accepted with compassion, has a quiet beauty of its own. Perhaps the person you could never forget was never meant to remain beside you. Perhaps they came to introduce you to yourself, not the version shaped by fear, not the version trying to please everyone, not the version constantly searching for certainty, but the quieter self, the deeper self, the one that has always existed beneath every role you have ever played. If that is true, then the encounter was never meaningless, even if it ended, even if it hurt, even if no explanation ever arrived. Its purpose may have already been fulfilled, because you are no longer exactly the person you were before it happened, and that matters more than you may realize. One day, perhaps months from now, or years, their name may cross your mind again. You may hear a familiar song, walk down a familiar street, notice the same kind of evening light resting against a window, and for just a moment, the memory will return. But something will be different. Instead of pulling you backward, it will quietly remind you of how far you have traveled. You will smile, not because nothing hurt, but because everything that hurt helped shape the person now standing here. That is wisdom, not the absence of pain, the peaceful understanding of it. If you have stayed with me until this quiet moment, thank you. There are countless voices in the world asking us to move faster, to become stronger, to forget more quickly. But tonight, you chose something different. You chose to listen, not only to these words, but perhaps to yourself. And sometimes, that is where healing truly begins. If these reflections brought you even a small sense of peace, I invite you to become part of this quiet community. Subscribe to Jung at Night, where we explore the hidden landscapes of the human soul through the timeless psychology of Carl Jung. And if there is someone in your life, or perhaps someone only in your memory, who might need these words tonight, share this video with them. You never know which quiet conversation may become the beginning of someone's healing. Now, there is nothing left to understand, nothing left to solve, only this moment, your breathing, the silence around you, the quiet rhythm of your own heart. Let the memories settle, like snow falling across an empty field. Let the questions become softer. Let the night carry what no longer needs to be carried by you. The stars have no urgency. The trees have no fear of tomorrow. The river never forces itself to reach the sea. Everything arrives in its own time. So will you. Rest now. The work of your soul has never stopped. Even in the moments you believed nothing was changing, it was quietly preparing you for the person you are still becoming. Sleep peacefully, and remember, the deepest journeys are often the ones no one else can see. Good night.